Everyone, welcome to Quick Connect Live. So the Quick Connect Live session is one of the tracks, right, of the StrengthsFinder Singapore network. So today's topic, we're going to talk about the dangers and benefits of profiling tools. So this is kind of interesting, right? Because the last round we started talking about like vulnerability and all the different things, and then we said, hey, why don't we start exploring profiling tools, especially since all of us do Clifton Strengths, right? Or if you don't, you should. So when we started looking at it, we started wondering, right, what do we think are the dangers and benefits of profiling tools? So maybe we can do a quick introduction. Let's just introduce our names and indicate your top two, because it's the top one, I'll just say Clifton Strengths, right? So your top two favorite profiling tools. Right, okay, let's start with the person we haven't seen for a really, really long time. Let's start with Eddie.
I think I keep using DISC and of course the MBTI. MBTI.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, let me add on. Okay, so your top two and why you like them.
It's not exactly why I love them, but I find that, hey, every time when I do their test, I always get the same result, almost the same, if not the same.
DISC and MBTI.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so it's consistent, right? You don't feel like, oh, every time keep changing.
Yeah, except for 16 personalities. The
16
one
PF.
Yeah. The one I vary a bit.
Okay, interesting. Because 16 PF is, I think it's based on MBTI as well, right?
Yeah.
16 types. Okay, cool. So Eddie, pick the next person.
Maybe Eileen.
Yes, hi, Eddie. Thank you, but I haven't met you. So the two tools, I think the common ones.
Yourself, then the two tools and why you like them.
Okay, so Eileen, professionally a coach now and doing a lot of side gigs and enjoying myself. I think the two tools, pretty much like Eddie, I won't say I like them, but they are more commonly used and easier to understand. And that's why the DISC and the MBTI. I mean, obviously, strengths being one that we are now using more of, but it's something that I'm still learning to master it.
Okay, so strengths is like trailing third. How about sound wave?
And then that comes a close fourth.
That's the fourth, not the. Okay lah.
Eventually, strengths and sound wave should be the top 1 and 2. I mean, the reason why I just said MBTI and this is simply because this is easy to understand. And I just also got refreshed yesterday when I attended a webinar and somebody was talking about it. Yeah.
So today's session, we're going to talk about benefits and dangers, right? Then following sessions, we're going to do what the three of us have termed what profiling tools shoot up. So we'll compare profiling tools and, kind of tear them apart and look at
that would be interesting. Yeah,
I think it'll be interesting too, right? And especially we have people who are certified in different profiling tools here.
Yeah.
So we will pit against each other. It'll be fun. Okay, thanks, Eileen. Pick the next person.
Faith. Somebody new I don't know as well.
Yeah, hi, I'm Faith. I think typically I do the MBTI more often, almost yearly, I guess. And once in a while, I also introduce what? I'm working now as a service development manager, but looking for a career switch towards a customer success manager. But we'll see how it goes. Yep. So this is like my third time here only, but yeah. Personality test, mostly I do MBTI and also Enneagram.
Okay. What do you like about MBTI and Enneagram?
I think MBTI, because I done it quite a few years off and on, so I also realized that my own profile changed over time as the years goes by. And I think Enneagram is I don't know, it's just a different way of putting across your strength, I guess, as compared to MBTI.
Okay. So MBTI and Enneagram is familiar, it's easy to understand. Cool. Pick the next person.
Zizhen?
Okay. So hello everyone. I'm Zijun. I work in BCA, doing manpower planning. So my two favorite profiling tools are Clifton Strengths and also Emergenetics.
Jeffer, well done.
Yes.
Must give you a thumbs up.
So why I like Clifton Strengths was because was the first tool where I went for workshop as opposed to others like MBTI where it's just like do online and read materials So that was the thing about Clifton Strengths for me, and also for Emergenetics also lah. Then what I like also about Emergenetics is that it is simple to understand the four thinking colors and also the three behavioral. So it's quite easy to understand and to explain. I think the part about explaining to others is also very important because otherwise people cannot really, and to them it's just theory lah. So that is the sort of like the Emergenetics, I think.
Interesting. Thanks, Zijin. Pick the next person. We have 3 left.
Ethan, since he just come in.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Ethan, introduce yourself. Which are the 2 profiling tools you like the most and why?
The tool that I like the most. I cannot say strength, right?
Can. It's okay. It's okay. Whatever it is.
Okay, so what do? I build great cultures in companies. That's the best way of describing it. Two of my favorites. First one is Enneagram. Something that we can talk about. Enneagram is one of the things where if you do it right and you do the test properly, you can really talk about your upbringing, your traumas in childhood, and all this kind of stuff, right? The other one, they call it Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory.
What the hell?
Yeah.
Okay.
So MMPI. So that's the one that profiles what kind of psychotic disorders you have. So are you a little bit schizoid? Are you a little bit depressed? Are you a little bit anxious? So it's actually designed for psychiatry. So that's one of the things that I like about it. So these two are the main ones that like very related back to your disorders or your issues as a person as your core thing. So opposite of strengths, if you look at it, because strengths is all about your strengths, this one's all about where your problems are.
Interesting. Is that free?
MMPI, you can take it for free.
Yeah, I do it halfway. It's like too mind blowing. Then I stop it.
500 plus
I didn't complete it.
500 plus
Plus questions. Oh my god, that's crazy.
Yeah,
by the way, Clifton Strengths only 177 questions, so not so bad.
Yeah, drop it. Yes, great.
Ethan. Okay, Ethan, pick the next person. Carol, Melissa, and Lillian hasn't spoken yet.
Okay, I'll just go for Carol first.
Hi, Carol. You're still muted, Carol.
Okay, hi, sorry, I was late and I don't even know what the question is. Apologies.
No problem. So introduce yourself. Tell us what are your 2 favorite profiling tools and why.
Okay, I am a communications person and I specialize in crisis management, personal branding, thought leadership, and media relations.
Wow.
Okay, so that's a lot, right? Yeah. Well, in terms of profiling, right, the truth is I haven't really been exposed to too many because I don't really use them in my work. The most recent one that I used was the Strengths Finder, which I found quite interesting because many tools focus on what are the things that you don't have, right? What are your shortcomings and so on. But this one focused on what your strengths are and how to develop them further so that you can improve overall. But again, a lot of questions required. Is there a free version? I don't know. I suspect not also. I did it as part of a team building exercise in my company. I found it quite insightful because it was like the first time that I learned quite a lot of things about myself. Because like I said, a lot of the other profiling tools focus on what I'm looking.
You are in the right place, Carol. You are in the right place. We are the Strengths Finder Singapore network, right? So you are in the right place. Okay, thanks, Carol. Nominate the next person. It's either Lillian or Melissa.
Melissa?
Hi, Melissa. Ball being
Hi.
passed to you.
Okay, hang on. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. If you can switch on your video, that'd be great too.
Oh, okay. You've been hearing me all the while. Okay. Hi.
Hi.
I only ever know a test. Is it called Shirzad? I don't know if it's a legit test, but someone sent me the link. It's about self-saboteurs.
Self-sabotage, okay, interesting.
Yeah, what are the self-sabotaging things? So you have like victim mentality, all those things.
Yeah, I think it's called positive psychology quotient or something like that.
Yeah, correct. So I only ever know that, and the other ones that I have knowledge of would be personality tests. Like those is it MBTI?
Yeah,
like
so those are
INTJ,
considered as those, yeah.
Yeah, so I only know those two. I don't really have a favorite. I don't think the self-sabotaging test is very detailed.
Right.
I mean, it just gives you like an overview, but I don't know if it's because I haven't read in depth yet. But yeah, I just did a link that someone like just pop up things on Facebook, and then it links you to that self-sabotaging test. Yeah, so I've not read in detail. Then the other test that I have knowledge of is the INTJ. Yeah.
MBTI.
Okay.
MBTI, yeah. So that one is that one is quite accurate, I guess. Yeah. But I don't know what are the dangers. What are the dangers of it?
That's what we're gonna talk about today.
Yeah.
Oh,
This we're
okay.
going to talk
Yeah.
about today.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. So Lilian, you are the last person. Please introduce yourself. Top 2 favorite profiling tools and why?
Okay, so my name is Lillian. I'm currently studying right now. I don't really have a favorite profiling tool, but the one that
strengths. I'm sorry.
Stop selling the same thing. Sorry.
I don't really have a so like, but I heard of the one that are more common is I think this and the MBTI.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, do you like them?
As in I don't really know much to say I like them, or I don't really know any other personality test to say I have a favorite or not lah. So it's very hard for me to say whether I like it or not. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so for me, since I've not gone yet, my favorite tools, obviously Clifton Strengths is one of them because I find it really, really precise. When someone tell me the top 5 talent teams, right, then I start describing their behaviors and their likes and dislikes, and then they go like, hey, how do you know so much? Wait, how do you know it's in your top 5? It's like, oh, really? So I love it because it's really fun when people go like, how do you know this? And the other one that I really like is the Enneagram. So I like Enneagram because of the way it's created, right? And one of the distinguishing features of Enneagram is this, what they call the 9 levels of development. So for every type, Enneagram actually kind of profiles, right? For your type, what is the healthy development levels look like, the average development levels look like, and the unhealthy development levels look like. And the unhealthy one can go all the way down to psychosis. So when I look at it, it's like, it's actually quite scary on my personality type. But it also gives me some handle of recognizing that, hey, we do move along different levels of health for whatever personality types we have. So that was unique and interesting for me when I got to know the Enneagram. So today's topic really is about, so we know about MBTI, we know about the ISC, we know about strengths, we know about the positive psychology one, we know about emergenetics and things like that, right? So why profiling tools, right? What's the benefits of profiling tools? Maybe let's talk about that first, right? Because all of us, most of us probably love profiling tools to some degree, that's why we take them. So, what are the benefits of profiling tools? Why do we take them in the first place? Anyone? So this is just open conversation, right?
Yeah.
Anyone? Why do you take profiling tools?
Why not I just start lah, because it's easier. Like I recently went on a spate to go back to profiling tools recently again. That's why with Jeffers the other time with the emergent ethics, I went back to my StrengthsFinder profiles. I went through all these different things, right? Like why do I do it? Because it's fun. It's always something that you can learn about yourself along the way. Each one has their skill. I might not agree with it. Like I might not agree with the way they look at people. But for me, a lot of them are really about different perspectives of how to look at people. But most importantly is that you always discover something new when you try out these tests. So it's never cut and dry system, right? Because most of the ones that are a little bit more established, there's tons of books on them. There's tons of information on them. So even the 5 love languages, right, like has evolved so much as a concept that it's so comprehensive that like you can even talk about in different forms of the person's 5 love languages. You can even talk about it mixed with other things. So it's very useful to find another new lens to look at people. So that's why profiling tools are fun for me.
It helps you to kind of codify or provide us with a structure with which to, I guess, understand the differences of how people are, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll add on to what Ethan said, a slightly different perspective. I think it's more towards first, it creates a language for people to talk about it. So that, I mean, if you sometimes like without a language, people will tend to attribute a person's behavior to something negative. Because just by nature, the personality is mismatched, right? Or is different from you. But that language itself creates a common ground for people to agree to disagree, and at least say, oh, maybe you are behaving this way because that's your tendency, and I didn't see it that way. That's number one. So number two will be more towards like self-awareness, like your own blind spots, right? You can't see your own blind spots. And a profiling tool does help you to like review that, especially when you're stuck, right? With dealing with people or you face certain challenges that you can't pull through. Then suddenly a profiling tool realize, hey, actually all this while this is the way that you have been doing things. So for example, right, I gave like StrengthsFinder, right? One of my key actions was responsibility. So every time I take action was because I feel responsible that I need to do something because I committed to someone else, which is different from somebody who is an activator, right? So just knowing that itself, know that, hey, maybe sometimes I may take on too much on myself, and I will be aware around like, hey, maybe next time, are you sure you can commit with so many things that you have now? So that does bring that kind of benefit just by knowing yourself as well as knowing where you can work towards as well as your own boundaries.
It's very much like the EQ model, right? So we start off with what we call self-awareness, and then you can have self-management. Because without awareness, you cannot manage yourself. You can't manage what you do not know about yourself. So the profiling tools then give us some way of understanding ourselves, right? So Jeffrey, when we were talking about the understanding each other and the differences, funny story came to mind. So I remember when I started my first job, we were made to do DISC. And one of our, well, let's say someone quite senior, right, in our team, and she was in charge of our finances and stuff, and she was very, very detailed. So for those of you familiar with DISC, that's the S part of the DISC, right? So her S is really, really strong. So she'll go around asking for all the details, and then she'll go around telling everybody, I'm sorry, I'm an S. Then we go like, yep. Sorry, it's just a joke. But she wasn't even aware what she was saying, so we were just laughing it off. It was hilarious. But yeah, absolutely right. It's about that awareness that helps us to understand each other, and also, yeah. So those of you who take DISC, if you're high S, you might want to think twice about going around telling everybody that
you're an S.
Sorry, it's so funny. Anyone else?
There's no test for asking whether a person is high too much, right?
Yeah, you just look then.
There may be tendencies
Yeah. I mean, I love the topic of profiling tools, right? So
VIA nice. Got humor as one of the values. So values in action.
I don't know.
You should go check it out. Yeah.
Maybe I'll try. Anyone else? How about maybe someone new? Lillian, Carol, or Melissa? What do you think are the benefits of profiling tools?
I think it allows you to unleash hidden potential, like like, because it's like holding up a mirror to yourself, right? I mean, like doing the test and reading the results. Yeah, it's like holding a mirror to yourself, and the mirror doesn't necessarily show the fairest of them all. I mean, it shows like your warts and your like all the ugly sides of you as well. So I guess to the extent you can work on yourself, and yeah, it allows you to maximize your potential, explore your interests, heal your wounds, like your hidden wounds, like things that you don't even know, which it can be attributed to childhood. I mean, you would think that like you had a normal childhood, right? And you like, to a certain extent, like you didn't have that much. I mean, we were sheltered in that sense. I mean, we didn't have to fight for a living like during our childhood, right? Yeah, so I guess it exposes the wounds and the traumas that you need to heal to so that it allows you to also identify the triggers, like what triggers you, whether it's positively or negatively. Yeah, so in essence, it like holds a mirror up to your face. Yeah, that's my point of view.
Reality check. And the whole thing about childhood traumas is right off Ethan's turf, right? So Ethan, you want to talk about it? Trauma and
so why I talk about MMPI and Enneagram is because a lot of them relates back to childhood belief systems. So a lot of us, when we're brought up, we have certain belief systems that are taught to us due to family upbringing and childhood. So a lot of people think, no lah, children, they grow up like that one. No, actually not. A lot of things, children actually learn from their parents, learn from the environment, learn from the people around them. And so that's why I care a lot about the trauma aspects of things, because a lot of people don't understand that trauma is actually the 80 or 90% of why we do what we do. Then context is the last 10-20%, right? A lot of the ways that we are perceiving the world is due to the lens that we have from our traumas. What is good or bad is dependent on our belief systems. Our belief systems come from our traumas. And so if we take a test, why a person is sociopathic might be actually because of their traumas in the past. And understanding that is a very important key of understanding people.
So in other words, well, when we do a profiling tool, we are understanding the traumas of each other.
Yes. Provided you answer honestly.
So it reminds me of don't know whether the inner game of tennis. So there's this model by Tim Galloway that talks about performance equals to potential minus interference. Right. So I pick up from Melissa's point about it measures potential. But at the same time, what Ethan mentioned about traumas, these are things that might create interference as you grow up, right? And as the way you think, the way you relate to people, and that does affect your performance. So that just came out to me lah. So I thought like, hey, that's an interesting relationship that I'm seeing.
I love that term. Can you? We need to talk about it later. Yeah.
Performance equals
potential minus interference.
Potential minus interference.
Yes.
Yeah. I remember a common friend who shared that with us as well. So actually interesting, right? When we look at our profiling tools, it also tells us where it interferes with our lives or with our performance, right? So in the Clifton Strengths language, sometimes we say, does your talent teams help or hinder, right? Your situation. So helping, you look at the talent teams. So for example, for me, right, if I have learner and I love learning new stuff, but I go around spending my time exploring new things because it's very interesting for me instead of doing my work, then it hinders me, right? I get distracted. So the outcome of learner, which is the great love for new knowledge, actually becomes an interference or a distraction from doing my work. So if you look at it, it really gives us that whole flavor of each other, right? Anyone else? Why would you Why do you think profiling tools are useful?
Because it's fun. Because so for example, like in like workshops with your like department, right? For example, I did the last year on emergenetics. So there was one where like I think it was arranging us by our expressiveness. So then you can arrange. Then you if you compare the two ends, very expressive versus the not very expressive, then you can tell the difference a lot. And
I want to
it's very fun. It's very fun to know like how each other are like lah. And also because so for example emergenetics has on the thinking behavior, thinking preference, right? So thinking preference is not something that is immediately apparent based on other people's behavior. So those I think personality profiling tools that shed light on other people's thinking behavior are very useful to help us to understand others. So that's what I like. And also I agree with whatever everyone has been discussing on like understanding ourselves. I think that is also very important and really very helpful.
For me, one of the things that I love about the profiling tool is that by understanding each other, it actually builds trust and reduces conflict. So one of my personal experience is at one point of time I had a new boss, and most people didn't understand where he was coming from, right? And getting a bit frustrated. In some ways, we were a bit cautious. We had in mind, right, the way he does things is like so focused on performance and optics and how things look. We were very worried that, you know, if something goes wrong, he's the type of boss who will throw you under the bus, right? They were so like, oh my God, why, how do I work with this guy? So at one point of time, managed to get him to do Clifton Strengths, one of my hidden talents of convincing bosses to do profiling tools. So when he did his profiling tool, I kind of started to know why he did certain things because I understood his motivations behind it. And when I started to understand his motivations behind it, I felt like I understood him better, and I felt the level of trust increase. And that actually changed the way we work with one another. So to me, that was quite pivotal in how I used it, right? Because it was quite scary to get your boss to do a profiling tool, and whether your boss is even secure enough to let you know what his profile is. Because some bosses will not refuse to let you know what the results of their profile is because they're worried, right? So this particular person did not, and then we got to know each other better, and eventually he unlocked his full 34, and we went to the stage whereby I actually had the opportunity to take him through his report of his full 34 of why he behaves in a certain way. And then, you know, it's just really interesting because when we start to see each other in new lights because of profiling through that same language, understanding motivations, you know, it reduces the guesswork of who that person is and what he does. And that increases the trust and therefore the working relationship. Yeah, so even though I do coaching and all this, right, in the real world application, I think for me, that's the best benefit. You know, understanding where people's motivations, what they're trying to do, and then improving the working relationship. That's for me. Okay, anyone else has not gone? Eileen, have you gone?
I suppose I agree with what everyone said. Like most of the time we use tools. If you are in an organization, it's either the organization uses it, like in my previous organization, they use MBTI, right? And then they talk about, you know, what is your profile. Or you use it for programs like leadership development programs or something like that. I think they are good in that they help you to understand yourself. The only challenge I have is that you only understand as much as you read from the report. If you are not certified, you're just a user and a consumer of that tool. So you just read whatever you read, right? And some reports are written in language that not directly translatable to English language understanding. So you may interpret it wrongly, misinterpret it, and therefore you may also misunderstand other people. So to me, that is probably a risk. I mean, maybe it's just a danger part, which I'm sure we'll go into.
Yeah. But so I was going to say that's the perfect segue to talk about danger. So you can start talking about dangers.
So it's like good. It's really good, but then you don't know much well enough, right? So like now that you do strengths and I do strengths, I said, I still need to know the content and blah, blah. And then I read, so I have my other half to do the profile, and I know, but I'm like, yeah. I look at his balcony and basement, like, yeah, now you know why he's like that. But you're just giving yourself an excuse, like, okay, that's the reason why he behaves like this, like this, like this. And he's always at the basement, blah, blah, blah. But
that statement was perfect.
Yes.
So you don't know, right? I mean, you don't know whether your interpretation is correct. So you just give yourself an excuse to stereotype the person for whatever it is. And especially if they irritate you, you stereotype them as the basement behaviors. You choose all the basement behaviors that they are behaving and you just call them as basement behaviors. so that's my only worry when I do the profiling, right? So I did Anagram as part of the ICF event last year. And yeah, so it's as much as I can read it. I mean, I have a few friends who supposedly know it a little bit better, but that's about it, see. The depth of knowing, I hear what you guys are all saying, the benefits of all the different tools, but I probably haven't been able to unlock the full benefits of the tool because I don't know anybody else who really knows that much about it to share with me. You know what I mean? To kind of walk me through my report. So that's the limitation of the benefits that people can get.
Okay, so Eileen, we're going to have a event soon that I'm planning and organizing. I call it the Strengths Coaching Fiesta, whereby I'm gathering a whole host of Gallup certified strengths coaches to provide group coaching for community at large. So that is planned in June, still in the works, just letting those on the call know. And you can join in, we'll see where that goes. You have access to a whole wide range of Gallup certified strengths coaches as well. So I love what you said about a couple of things, right? So one is misinterpretation. So you might misinterpret if you don't understand the depth of it. The second one was stereotyping, right? We end up stereotyping people, which may not fully capture this person's personality or motivations or thinking. And then the last one that I thought was very nice was some people use it as excuse, right? It's like, oh, because I'm like that, that's my profiling tool, so I'm like that, no? And then they use it as excuse to get away with murder, so to speak. And that can indeed become a danger because it, instead of promoting growth, it now promotes stagnation, right? The person just goes like, I'm like that, what to do? That's my profiling tool, so I'm like that. And then they don't see that there is potential to change and grow, right? What else do you think? Since we are on the topic of dangers or risk, I think that's a perfect 3 points that Eileen has mentioned.
Hi, this is Carolyn. Can I just share for the danger bit?
Okay.
Sure. So I don't know what profiling tool was used for this particular purpose, but when I had a new colleague join another team, but I was working closely with him, and I actually knew him previously before he joined the company. And when he was first hired, HR actually flagged to me and his supervisor that when he did his some profiling test, I don't even know what profiling test this was, it showed that he was anti-establishment and risk taker. So I work for a very conservative organization. Yeah. So I felt that was a danger because I was very upset that they thought or they felt that a risk taker and someone who's anti-establishment is a red flag. To me, I felt that, number one, it kind of like you already pigeonhole the person before you even know him. And the second thing I felt was it was a bit dangerous to use this tool to kind of decide on what are the people that you feel can be trusted or not trusted. Because the kind of things that the team worked with was very confidential, P&C stuff. And like I said, very conservative company. So at that point in time when I was working with this company, I was actually quite disturbed, okay, because I felt, oh my God, this is how we hire people. I mean, I was hired a long time ago, so I didn't know, I didn't have the benefit of those kind of tests, profile testing, but he did, and I felt like, oh, gosh, like, is this how we function? We worry about people being risk takers and being outliers and being the establishment. So I feel that that's a danger actually, because it means that you can kind of use it. It has its benefits in that you can maybe use it to shape a team that you want, but it also means conversely that you can create a team that is maybe prone to groupthink, or you don't have anyone who can play a devil's advocate role, or that kind of stuff. You don't want people to be outliers. You want people to just conform, to be part of the bell curve. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? Because in organizations, and we do group coaching as well, we find a couple of things happen. People like people who are like themselves, so they kind of hire people who are similar, and then the people who are different tends to stick out like a sore thumb, right? So I guess the profiling tool, all it does is it gives a language around describing that person, right? But it's up to the organizational culture that tells you whether or not they cut off the grass that is outstanding, right? There's this proverb that says that the tall grass gets cut, or we appreciate that that's the only person who brings something different to the team. So outside of, that can happen for any profiling tool or with or without profiling tools. I think it's more a function of the culture of the team and organization, of how well they accept differences into the group. And Caroline, I think it's interesting that you mentioned how people have prejudged each other based on the profiling tool. And I think that is indeed one of the dangers, right? We look at it and go like, wow, Faith got positivity. Everything also okay one, blind to all the negative things. She too positive already. Right? Don't bring problems to her. She will just make you feel very bad. Okay, so that's just a random kind of a thing of how we end up stereotyping a person instead of using it as a point of understanding the person and getting curious. Right? I've seen many people do that.
Yeah, that's to the point, right? Because you understand very little of it, and then you just interpret it for the English language as it's written there. And we all know strength is not meant to be understood in the pure English terminology. So that's why that's the danger, right? Then back to Carol's point. That's why it's important that we know which tools are designed for recruitment and which are not designed for recruitment, because I think in my previous organization, we are quite clear, we are quite clear in certain tools that we use, that it will never be used for recruitment. Or even for that matter of fact, I think they hardly use tools for recruitment per se. They make people go through like various tests. What do you call that? Those assessment centers, yeah. But not those psychometric tools per se, for recruitment at least. Precisely of the dangers that Carol pointed out.
Yeah.
Even to add on to what Eileen shared, right? Even so it's just purely a psychometric tool. It's definitely not going to be used for selection or recruitment purpose, because it's not enough data to validate. Even like image genetics, there's an extension tool that is done for interviewing and recruitment and selection purpose, but that even requires you to go in to talk to the leaders to talk about their particular role. What do they see that role? How do they rank it? What do they want? Then you still have an interview process to validate whatever you have initially identified, right? Let's say certain thinking style and behavior traits, right? Before then you finalize whether that is really the person you want to hire in. So it's quite a rigorous process. So as a standalone psychometric tool, definitely not enough to do that lah. I think it's unfair to the person who's being interviewed also. It's also a bit of a discrimination in that sense.
Actually, it's quite interesting. I'm not sure whether you all have had this experience. I've heard of insurance companies who get everybody come do a profiling tool, and then they offer certain people to join them based on that profile.
Yeah, the IC.
I think it's the IC, right?
Yeah, they use the IC.
Yeah. And what do you think of that? I don't think the IC was designed for hiring and stuff.
Do you know about the most controversial one, which was VIA got sued by the UK government for promoting their services and then getting them into trouble?
No, please tell.
So you can read up on it. So one of the banks actually hired a CEO when the money was going down, when they were about to crash, and then they used VIA to rate whether the person fits the role. And what happened is they hired a person according to that, and what happened was that the person crashed the company. So they sued VIA, and from then on, VIAs cannot say that they're done for recruitment. So the only real recruitment ones that I know that all recruiters use is Harrison's. But Big Five is now becoming more popular because it's open source and you can test everybody. Again, why I don't like Big Five, why I don't like Harrison's. Harrison's is phone interview for 3 hours. And then Big Five is just really badly written. Like it's the most validated psychometric test in the world today. But because the interpretation and the usefulness of the information is so low that I cannot appreciate it. So we go back to that, right? Like if we're talking about usage of tests for hiring, first up is how you interpret the information is a huge bunch of stuff. Even in strengths, you have basement and balcony, right? You have maturity. There's so many elements to it. MBTI, you have maturity, you have all these different things. You talk about Enneagram, you have the development, right? So if you're talking about profiling tools on its own, the profile means nothing. I'm ENTP. Can you tell? Is it understandable? What does it mean? Right? I am an ENTP who is in inferior mode, who is suffering from burnout and therefore acting like an ISFJ, right? Why is that happening? How is that happening? Here's me when I burn out. That comes into another bunch of questions altogether. So, and then we go back to strengths, right? Strengths, how a person is functioning in their basement versus their balcony, completely different. Your top 5 talent teams can become your worst enemy. And you know that very well, Alex. So we go back to this, right? Whenever we use profiling tools, how are we reading it? What are we reading it for? And that goes back to the part, right? Profiling tools is a tool that is meant to help us understand people, not to whack people with small stereotypes. It's equivalent to racism, if you think about it. Oh, you ISTJ, that means you don't think, that means you only follow rules, right? It's that kind of reaction that people have that is the problem. It's because it's the lack of diversity. It's a lack of complexity, which is why, again, we go back to this, right? MMPI would have been seen as a psychiatric disorder thing. That means if you have any scores on that, it means you're psychotic to normal people. But to a person who is trained, it just means that you have this disorder, this traits of these disorders. You are likely to behave this way. You're likely to think this way. Likely, tendency, depending on environment, depending on situation. What is the context behind the situation? And then we look at teams, and there's all this kind of stuff.
So I think then, if you look at it, then the danger of profiling tools is the stereotyping and the judgment, right? So I guess when you know a person's profile, the question is, does it lead to greater understanding? So does a person feel more understood, or does a person feel more judged, right? So like, wow, hey, you're judging me for this profile or this result that I have. So it again comes back to, well, so, how people use it.
So I think what you point out is more like, does it make a person feel like this is my identity, or actually is a preference, right? Because it's a preference, what we are saying is you have tendencies or you prefer, but it doesn't mean that you are not extroverted at certain times, or so it's tendencies, right? So if let's say we're talking about automatic thinking, right? That means like you just go with the flow, you're not really thinking much. That's the tendencies that most of the time you do it. If I put it more like a mathematical formula, it could be out of 10 occasions, maybe 7 times you do it, then the 3 times you don't do it, that behave that way. So that's the way we talk about tendencies, right? So you're not that identity. That means you're not that introvert. You just tend to behave more in an introverted way in most of the occasions. So that's how I would see it lah. But I think the common thing where people misunderstood is they take that and assume that, oh, this model is me, and now I'm this sort of person. Then once they get very fixed into that identity, it's very hard to get out of it until somebody tells them, actually, that's not you, right? You just have tendencies to do that, but you can do it the other way. That's what coaching is about, right? When you coach other people in other areas where they don't see, they actually need to work on, but they just that sort of like telling them their blind spot, showing them the blind spots that they miss lah.
So, question: do you all think that profiling tools cause a person to stay more stuck because, oh, this is my profile, this is who I am? Or do you think profiling tools help a person to grow and develop?
I think this is the fun part, right? Well, I just want to start with, before we do that, there's a little thing that we want to test. How many of you, when you do profiling tests, think a lot before answering versus you actually just answer whatever comes to mind? So I just want to get a general vibe. I give you my answer first. I always automatic answer. So it's whatever comes to mind first when I'm reading it that I put in. So that's what I go with, because I know that my first instinct is my tendency, and therefore I'm testing that. What about the rest of you?
Same for me lah. So unless it's some statement where like I don't instinctively have a clear answer, then I may think more. But otherwise, I just, like for example, like then am I more like this or like this? Then I just click and go next . Furthermore, the psychometric or whatever has a lot of questions. If you spend so much time on one question, then you take them long to complete the whole thing.
Yeah.
Especially the 500 questions one, right?
Like mine, like the ones that
Terrible.
I
think generally, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think generally, if it's like a strongly agree, disagree, that kind of thing, it's very easy to just read and then answer. But those that have two different options for you to choose, that's where sometimes we'll struggle. It's either like both of it doesn't apply or both of it will apply, and then you have to think. So that's when I do the thinking. Otherwise, it's usually just instinct also.
Cool. Thank you for sharing.
I have a problem in that it can be instinctive. However, in some psychometric tools, they will tell you to think of a certain context, either at work or in your own real life kind of thing, right? And that's where you will start having that context in mind for the first few questions. And as you go along, you forget the context. And then you answer, and then you think like, hey, what was the context I was supposed to think about? Then you think hard. Then you like, don't know where. So halfway through your answer, you don't even know which context you're thinking. And therefore you think, in that sense, you think. Otherwise, I probably will go with whatever lah.
Yeah.
Because I know that in the end, right, there is some check and balance in the tool that will kind of trip you over if you think too hard.
The thing is, I developed my own tool, so nothing really trips me over nowadays. I can tell what the question is for, where it relates to, and what kind of answers it is, which is all the more I need to go by instinct, right? I just want to sound out the people who are typing in, just to add their answers into the thing first.
Yeah.
Carol was saying, go with the gut. Eddie says, even after he think hard and try to change the answers, he still gets the same result. And then therefore Tzu says, cause you're truthful to yourself. And then Faith goes, why would you want to change your answers though? Like, and then Eddie's like, to change, go for job interviews. But why would you want to get a job that are not going to be happy with?
Yeah, agree. Like if you like purposely, if you think that they want a particular kind of person, then you go and change your answer to fit that way. Then when you join, but they will know you don't fit what they are looking for. So in the end, you also leave. So it's a bit pointless to me.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Some people actually use it for promotions. So if you're using for hiring, then okay, it makes sense lah. Why will you get a job you don't want? But what if it's used for promotions? I've seen it before. Some people go for some assessments, then they go like, oh, I think my company values certain things. So they try to game the profiling tool, right? I'm not sure what profiling is, but I've heard of it. And I think people try to game it so that, they look more leadership material or something like that.
That's very strange. I've never heard of that before, but that's very interesting. Anybody heard of something like this before?
I won't say we use the tool to promote, but you use the tool to identify if your top talent has what it takes, or if they do not have, how then do you support them? Because you recognize they have the talent to be senior leaders, right? But you want them to be prepared for the role, and therefore you kind of help them by making them aware, like you said, because tools create that awareness, right? So it's like, my friend, you're good, we recognize you're good, but that role requires you to be, example, more self-aware or blah blah, and therefore the tool helps them. Like you said, it's a common language. You tell this guy or this lady that we need you to work on this aspect in order for you to be more successful at the new role. So I think from that perspective, it could be used for promotion per se.
There is educational point of view, right? So it's interventional approach. So this is where I think, you just say something beautiful. Yeah, just go
so it's back to the whole leadership development thing, where you use it as part of leadership development, where you identify your top talents or whatever, and then you use that to support them in that preparation process. And therefore developmental, like Ethan said.
Yeah, so the difference then comes to whether organizations use it for development or for evaluation, right? Because we've seen organizations use it for evaluation, and I don't think profiling tools largely are created for evaluation, but for development purposes, right? So it's a gross misuse, and if you do see organizations using it for evaluation, it's probably a huge red flag.
Oh, Eddie just added in there the company culture these days like more sociable. So I select answers that seem like, when you have an urgent meeting, do you press the elevator for everyone, or quickly pressing the button for the lift to close? By the way, these are so contextual that they actually have no value on a research level. These questions are so contextual because when they actually did a test, right, people answered a bunch of answers and then they actually tested whether they'll do it, right? All completely far off. The people who say that they won't press the leave the door open, right, usually were the ones who left the door open. Because they're actually aware of, hey, wait, if I'm really urgent, then I should go. But when they're in the actual situation and they were told it was urgent, but they know the value of what is happening, they know how to weigh it up. So this is also very interesting. I think this is where we go back to this stereotyping. Company cultures like to, so here comes the part, right? If your HR dares to use profiling tools to stereotype people, it means they're lazy. True? If somebody wants to use profiling tools because you're this, therefore you're that, then no. Because so here comes the part, right? Alex, how many tools do you know when you are as a strengths fighter coach other than strengths?
Well, let me count. Quite a few DIC, MBTI, strong interest inventory, imagenetics, enneagram. I've heard of Hogan's. I've heard of Harrison's.
Mm-hmm.
I have 7. There are more just off the top of my head, can't think of.
So even within us, we talk a lot about different types of profiling tools, even new ones I'm discovering. There's a new Big Five, EPSX, ENPX, like this new version that my cousin talked about the last round. So these are all useful information that we can use to understand people. Then what we do with it is a different story. But whenever you view people as solid objects that do not change, that's where the problem lies. So the danger of profiling tools is the same as communication. So the reason why politics exists in companies, and it's my pet topic also, why do politics exist is because they don't want to divulge information that will get them into trouble. But if your company is filled with people who don't need you to not divulge it, like they understand you, they're kind people, they're worth your time, they're people who are good to talk to, the information will be used well. If you're in an environment full of insecure people who look at people in one dimension, profiling tools are useless. In fact, they're harmful. And so we go back to this, right? A little bit of information or a little bit of information for an ignorant person is a lot more dangerous than a lot of information available for everybody. It doesn't matter. Just a little bit of information. Like rather don't tell him anything than give him any information for an ignorant person. Whereas a good person, no matter what information, they can take a lot. Okay, see you, Carol. Thanks for joining us. She says she has to leave now.
Before 9.
Oh.
Yeah, 4 minutes more. Thanks, Carol. See you.
Before 9.
Yeah, before 9. That's like 4 minutes. Awesome. So I'm going to play devil's advocate, right? In that case, we talk about the depth of knowledge of profiling tools, right? And like Eileen says, not everybody knows all the depth and nuances of a profiling tool, unless they have a coach, right? And then putting what you just said, that a little bit of knowledge could be more dangerous than no knowledge. So for people who taking profiling tools on their own, not having a coach, is it dangerous then? What do you all think?
I think got workshop better.
Got
So
workshop
for example, I took Strengths Finder and Genetics, both also have workshops. I think workshops help a lot. Those half day, full day ones, because they will cover enough information for you to interpret correctly. Like you won't after the workshop, you won't interpret it wrongly. Of course, like for example, Strengths Finder is very deep, but after a half day, 1 day course, you understand enough about your own talent teams to not make stereotyping. And also because coaches will obviously always emphasize that you shouldn't stereotype and so on. So I think workshops help a lot. But for individuals, I'm not that sure on that aspect. Because individuals may not be able to attend workshops.
I think it may be helpful for you. I mean, if you find that you agree with the test results, then find your close friend and share, hey, this is the test result I get. Do you all agree or disagree? To help you confirm whether, the test is right or accurate or not. That's what I usually do with my close friends. Yeah, I think it helps a lot to either validate or, help yourself know that, hey, actually you're not that way. Because sometimes, like Ethan mentioned, it depends on how fast you answer and in what type of scenario when you're getting off when you're answering the question. Yeah, so it may not always be true.
Validation, right? That's excellent point, Faith. Ethan, you're gonna say?
No, I just wanted to add on like this. That's I know for me, I spend a lot of time even analyzing what the test is really testing for. So anybody who knows me as like the guy who will spend time like, oh, so this question actually asks about this and therefore leads to this answer. So if you answer this is because of that, right? So I actually follow through on reading up on all these different tests and how they work. Why? Because I'm a psychometric buff. Like, because when I was trained in medicine, we had all these questionnaires in psychiatry to ask people for things, and I read them. I'm like, and then you have the more diverse versions or the more complex versions that actually are a little bit more accurate. Then you start going, hey, how does this work? And then you start looking at studies and everything. So one of my favorite parts about all of this is, again, why I still do like Strengths Finder, even though it's not my top two, right? Actually, it's my third. It's my third, yes. Yeah. So one of the main reasons is because it gives a useful perspectives to look at people. It depends a lot on the person's personality in terms of the way they answer the question also. When we talk about this, it's like some people just won't answer honestly. No matter what you do, you put them at gunpoint, they'll answer even worse, right? Like there are people who would never tell you honestly who they are. And that's just part of the thing. And recognizing that is going to be part of this understanding of profiling tools. So when we go back to that again, we go back to the fact that there's no profiling tool that can be telling you honest facts about yourself unless you're honest with yourself. So profiling tools are just your mirrors, what you think you are, what you think you have been, how you think of yourself. And it changes again according to the different types of mentality that you have. A lot of them try to outsmart you. But again, right, Singlish speakers think differently from American speakers, who also think differently from British speakers, even in terms of language. So as Eileen was talking about this, and even the language itself is different, like the euphemisms, the little nuances that they come with. Some sentences are complex. They have two different components. How do you break out the two parts? What do you say yes to? That's literally even how I look at psychometrics. Are they actually measuring both? Are they measuring the compound of the two? Is there another question that is, so I ask all these questions because it affects how we interpret all this information. And yes, and so we go back to this, right? Lillian added a really interesting thing. Faith also added something. It is interesting when you take multiple tests and some of the results overlap. It kind of confirms who you are in a sense. So I've taken all the tests, right? So now I'm a 7, wing 8, who is sexual social, which is a term in Enneagram. But at the same time, I'm ID on DISC, together with ENTP, together with and where I'm tri-model on emergenetics, and on Big
Very
Five,
try.
Very try. Yeah, very try. I've 30, so it was crazy. And then so once you put in all this into a picture and you still say this is you and you're comfortable with that, there's a different story altogether. Then you start understanding yourself in all the complexities of the perspectives that you can have. If you stick by only one, meaning StrengthsFinder is the only one. Sorry, Alex, I know you're running StrengthsFinder group, but you don't only follow one rule anyway.
No, I don't. Okay, so this is what I believe about profiling tools, right? A human is so complex that I don't believe there's any one single tool that can describe us altogether. But when we start to kind of layer it, right? So if we use Soundwave, we use DISC, we use MBTI, we use Enneagram, and we all kind of put it together and understand us as a complex human being. That gives us a lot more perspective, right? So I like to use that analogy of like a diamond, right? And then you have many, many different cuts and many different facets of which you look through. But it's because of all the different cuts and all the different facets that allows the brilliance of the diamond to shine through. So the more facets you have, the more brilliance you have, the more understanding you have, kind of thing. You see the complexity of it. I just made this up, but I thought it was a good analogy. So that's how I see profiling tools, and I think it's very useful. The other thing that Lillian, I saw you unmute yourself, then you muted when Ethan started speaking. So was that what you wanted to say?
Something along the line, but I just felt that like there's just, I mean, not to say that personalities tools are good or bad, but I think there need to be understanding that, I think like what you said, because like human beings are very complex creatures, right? And so like there isn't really any one tool that can like 100% define us. And like why are you using a tool that like, was because the creator who create the tool, right, is based on the data of many people, and then they start to like the algorithms and all, right? So the person doesn't really know who you are. So like why are you using someone else who doesn't know you to define who you are, even though there may be some truth in it? And I think there's something very important when working with like youth or like other people who may think that this is actually something that define them. And like what you all said about how personality tool will start to, because of personality tools, like we will start to like stereotype people based on their top strengths or their weaknesses. Yeah. And I think it's something like the iceberg thing. So it's like whatever we see is just the 10%, right? But behind, maybe the 10% is what the scores on our personality test. But maybe there's still 90% whereby there's other like circumstances and traumas or whatsoever with our closer friends or people that we don't know, that may, the 90% may start to surface over time. Yeah.
Good point. You also mentioned that it is important and the coach responsibility to let the audience know the pros and cons, especially for students who may think it's 100% true of their personality.
Yeah. Because when I was a student, because I think like it's very, like I do run workshops for secondary schools, and we usually use the DISC or like some other like tests, and like I think usually we just use it as a way to like like to create empathy or like to work along with others, to know how people work. But we don't really just like tell them that it's not like how to say, it's not 100% fixed kind of thing, but it's as in you can still change, your personality can still change. So I think like, because when I was a student, I also used to think that, oh, like this is my personality, so I can't change or what. But I think over the years, as you grow older, then you start to also learn that actually, like, you're not defined by a piece of paper, and why do you let a piece of paper box you up? Yeah.
That sounds almost like your grades for PSLE too.
I'm trying to connect the dots. Okay.
So it's interesting, right? Because you talk about change of personality, right? I thought we can talk a bit about that. So I would say generally for adults, I mean, unless you're going through some kind of trauma or you have some kind of crisis, they tend to be relatively stable around a good 2 to 3 years lah. So we or maybe from StrengthsFinder point is a longer period, right? But for youth, the brains are more dynamic because they're growing up. So there's, even in the psychometric world, youth profiles are slightly different from adult psychometric tools as well lah. And then they also understand, because youth the brains are still forming and developing, they do take some time to form as well. Yeah. So Ethan might speak to that since he psychiatrist, right?
So this is where the fun begins. Oh God. The thing about this is that personality is but a construct. First up, let's look at it in a manner. People think of personality as a fixed concept. What tool? Zijin was asking what tool. I don't know.
So she's responding to Faith.
Faith.
So Faith was saying that her profile changed 180 degrees within 5 years.
Which tool is this?
MBTI.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of people I know were functioning on inferior when they were taking the first MBTI test. So that's another long story on its own. So, for example, you're feeling burnt out the whole way through, your answers will be absolutely opposite of who you are. That's actually part of the test. That's actually ingrained within the test if you look at the original Jungian theory. So it's very interesting. So, like again, I'm a test buff. I actually research how it works and everything. So when we go back to this, right, your personality is a very interesting concept. I go back to traumas because that's the only thing that's unchanging. When I talk about unchanging is the original belief that you started with. So for example, when you were brought up, how many of you have parents who tell you to finish your food, then after that complain you got too fat? I do. So yeah. So yeah, then it's like so do I eat or do I not eat? Do I eat or do I not eat? So that actually forms one trauma. That creates a form of trauma. So anything that we don't understand is a trauma. This creates the beliefs of the future. I am not allowed to eat food, but whenever I have food in front of me, I need to finish eating it. So I always feel guilty for finishing the food. But at the same time, I always look to finish food. Like look for, but when food are not in front of me, I would like, don't eat. That's the mentality. So whenever food is in front of me, right, I will finish the whole plate. Like till today, right? These are tendencies of mine. I can stop, but it requires conscious energy. Even when I resolve the trauma, to be able to do this easily without using much energy, it's still a process for me because my automatic sequence is, as my mom said it when I was a kid, 你没有每一粒饭就是你的以后的老婆的pimple.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, did your parents tell you that?
Yeah, my mom told me that every rice that I left on the plate will become a pimple in my future wife's face.
Seems like a tradition that has spread across a lot of parents.
A
lot of families.
Yeah, so it's these kind of things that form our future belief systems actually without us knowing it. And so that's what your friends told you and their parents. Yeah, see, and then it will keep transferring down, right? And then everybody will feel guilty eating the food because they feel like I need to finish the food, but I cannot not finish the food because I'll get fat, but then I cannot not finish the food. And then then it goes back forth. That's what we term as a double bind. These are traumas. This creates anxiety in people's minds. It's like I have to make money, but I cannot make too much money. Like money is very good, but people who make money are evil. I'm not an evil person, so I cannot make so much money. So I need to earn a lot of money to be rich, but then I'm not allowed to make money because it'll be evil. That's a very common concept that people have about money, which is why they get confused around it. So how does this define your personality? Personality is far, far away from that. There are a lot of other defining elements before it comes out in a personality, right? How you manage money, how loud do you talk? For me, I'm loud as hell. Why am I loud? Because my family scream, shout, loud. Like normal talking volume is loud, right? So I follow those trends. That's my personality. These are outward behaviors that people view as personality. But my traumas also makes me feel like if I don't speak loud, nobody will listen to me. That's a different thing altogether. So I can still have the personality of being a loud person, but be able to speak softly and nicely at the same time. So that's the thing. A personality is a very, very vague and very inconsistent concept. If we look at it today, what we can go by is what a person believes in. What are the fundamental thoughts? Which is why I do like StrengthsFinder, because no matter what, I'll never be away from these 5 guys, right? I will always have too many ideas. I will always be looking at the big picture, right? Because my trauma when I was growing up was people keep on telling me I missed the big picture. So my strategic comes from there, right? My learner comes from my family being incredible readers. They read all the time, right? They're always talking about philosophical and conceptual things. Individualization, because my family is so bad at dealing with people that I had to learn it the hard way. So by learning how to manage each person differently. And then self-assurance, my family is really good in this area. That's why they're all really clear. Like, that's why they are very straightforward people. So all these kind of things are due to upbringing, belief systems. Can my personality change if I'm adjusting to other people? Yes. But can I, but it doesn't define me as a person. Yeah, Alex, you were laughing?
Yeah, I was laughing because I saw Faith's comment. Poor women. They always say women get the pimple, but never the male.
Yes, I know. All the women get pimple.
It's quite funny. But you know, when we're teenagers, it's usually the guys get most of the pimples. They get the acne, right?
Yeah.
So quite fair, quite fair. So I thought it's interesting, right? When we look at profiling tools, I think there are two types of profiling tools. There are behavioral, and then there's personality, right? So I think DISC falls more under behavioral. It's contextual. It changes very quickly from context to context, right? Whereas personality, like strengths, and I think some people say MBTI is also personality, tends not to change regardless of context. So maybe also the understanding of whether the tool, it's behavioral or personality, what it measures, is also important in terms of us understanding whether it should or shouldn't change, right? What do you think? Anyone?
Yeah, so I think we must not forget the point that the whole personality tool is self-rated, right? Right. So if it's self-rated, you are influenced by many things, which is I think why Ethan initially asked the question, like, are we doing based on our instinct, or are we thinking through analytically before we answer the question? And there are two things. One is, are you because it's meant to measure preferences, right? It should be automatic, it should be instinctive, and it shouldn't be done to measure your aspirational self. When people do it to analyze, they want to be somebody, but they are not now, and they answer the questions to be somebody they want to be in the future, then of course you get funny results from your personality test that's not you. And of course later on you will disagree with it, and people around you will also share with you that that's not you. So we must not, so we must be careful also that personality to itself is self-rated lah, in that sense. Yeah, Ethan, I thought you wanted to cover this point, right?
Sorry, I went too far away from that. I was just talking about what it means. Sorry.
You had the big picture. I'm sorry.
Yeah. That's part of my strategic lah. Sorry. And ideation went on and on lah.
You went too high up until you lost the point. Too small.
But at least I had some jokes in it, so it's okay.
So I think when we look at things like so definitely the self-rated part about aspirational versus a real self is how honest you are with yourself lah. So if you end up answering your aspirational self, then of course everything goes a little bit more haywire. Then I think I also wanted to bring the point that, look, when you do like DISC, it does change very, very quickly, because also it measures your public self versus your private self and things like that, and your composite self, right? So if your public self in DISC actually changes very quickly from context to context. So if you did the same DISC tool and you think about work versus you think about home versus you think about church or whatever, it changes. It's the same profiling tool. Then you go like, so which is me? Oh, this is me in different contexts, right? So just do recognize and understand what that profiling tool is actually measuring, and that will help you to understand it a little bit better.
I think one of the best questions that you just asked here is, which is me? Or what is me? I think this is where, if you have an idea of a me that is fixed, no tools are useful. All tools will pigeonhole you into I am this or I'm not this. This is crap. I will not believe this. I will not use this to understand myself better. Why did the answers come out this way? I remember my first round of getting strengths final answers, my strengths. My first question was, why did these results come out? What are the other parts of the 34? What is it that I slow? Why is this the way? Am I really that person? Do I want to be that person? And I think that's exactly why it goes, right? Like, what the kind of questions you ask after getting a test matters as much.
Yeah. So it's just a tool, right? And it's more of like how do you use it after that as well. That also comes back to whether it be work context or whether we pigeonhole or whether we use it to be curious about people. So I got to know someone who was someone who, how do I describe? This person is a strengths coach, recently certified when I got to know this person. And this person went like, oh, if this person has learner, the person should be like this, which was effectively stereotyping and pigeonholing the person, right? So the depth of knowledge of that tool needs to be accompanied by the mindset of that curiosity, of recognizing that just because I think it was Faith or Lillian, right, who says that your life is not determined by a piece of paper, right? So it gives us guideposts to kind of understand each other so that we can get curious, right? So I might go to Faith and I say, hey, Faith, tell me more about your input. How does it show up for you, right? What do you collect? What kind of knowledge do you gather? How do you store it? How do you process it? How do people appreciate it? Do people keep coming to you to ask you for more information because you seem to know about everything, right? So this is an example of curiosity, right? But if I went to Faith and I said, hey, Faith, you got input, which means that you must read a lot of things, right? You must love collecting a lot of information. Maybe you also collect all collect stamps. Do you collect stamps? Most people collect stamps. So the moment I say something like that, she gets that. Do you see her face? It just went like, what are you talking about? Can you stop like pinning all these things on me? That's not me. Right, Faith? So it's how we use it. And that's a really important part. If we use it well, the benefits are amazing. Use it badly, I've had many people who walk away feeling terrible after a coaching session. They're like, this person keep telling me that I'm like that, and none of it's true. And the person doesn't even stop to listen to me to let me explain. So then it becomes a really, really uncomfortable session, right? And we've all seen that done before.
I thought
so
Alex
like
raised...
Alex,
Faith, you continue?
Oh no, so I just wanted to emphasize on what Alex mentioned is that like connectedness, restorativeness, possibility, whichever that strength that you have, right? It's really main of it would be on a single area. It's not on all aspects of your life. So that's why it's like, I may have input at work, but I may not have input into another person's life, for example. Yeah, so I guess at the end of the day, no matter what kind of results you get, you need to understand yourself better and understand that in what context are you this way. It's not always the same for all situations. So don't make yourself into a box just because you receive this result that you agree with it half the time, something like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, a great point about the box, right? I like what Faith says. So I think in a certain sense, all the profiling tool frameworks are nothing but metaphors that describe things, right? And they just come in different form of metaphors. And Alex might know this, right? The danger of metaphors is it can give you a way of describing it, but it can also box you if you think that metaphors are real, right? They are just illusions, right? So they come and go, and then you have a new metaphor that help you to understand from a new perspective. And a couple of things that came out. One was like, if it helps you to understand yourself, it helps you to grow. The usage of the metaphor is definitely useful for you. The other one is more in terms of how you relate to people, right? If it helps you to connect with one another much more, then it is also a useful way of using that metaphor of personality too. If it is like making you having a lot of conflict and start judging other people, then those are sort of symptoms for you to know that maybe you're not really on the right track. Yeah, so just to point this out.
If nobody wants to hire you as a coach for your profiling tool, there's something wrong. That's definitely a case.
Thanks for hiring me, Ethan.
No, dude, my plan is to send you to other people. Okay, right? That's how much I enjoy our session. And
thanks,
that's
Ethan.
the thing.
You have the big picture.
Sorry. So I was just thinking, right? I mean, as Jeffers was talking about metaphors, I'm just thinking you might like a particular tool because you like the profile results, whether it's really you or the aspirational you as we were talking about just now. and you don't like the tool or you invalidate a tool because you don't want to accept the results for whatever purpose, whether you know the tool well enough or you don't know the tool well enough, but you just want a particular result for whatever matters. Whether it's to please your friends, to fit into the organization, to fit your role, whatever, right? So I'm just thinking that, you know, I mean, I enjoy what you guys are saying, and I resonate with what you guys are saying, but I'm just thinking that when Jebba talk about metaphors, right, then it come to me like, yeah, but I may like something because it sounds good. I like that profile. I like that metaphor. And then I think that tool is really good.
It could be.
Could be, yeah. Yeah.
As long as
there must be some reasons why you like it as well, lah. Maybe the way you it really describes certain parts of you that speaks to you, that resonate with you. Which is why we also talk about the usefulness of metaphor law. If it really helps you, it's useful, right? If it's really not helping you, then there are some people who think that it's not useful, but this is the real thing that I need to adhere to, lah. So that's what we pointed out to, where sometimes it's not that as solid as you think it is, or not as real as you think.
That's why the whole thing about coaching or having someone certified and knowing the tool to explain to you is important. Because like when I first knew my top 5 and I'm like, what's maximizer? What's arranger? Like, okay, yeah, I arrange things. Like, then what's maximizer? You know what I mean? But until when I was talking about it with Kim Pong, because he saw me in action, organizing an event, which he was part of as my vendor at that time. And then he could kind of explain that, you know, you can see yourself doing this because your maximizer was at play, and then this is where your arranger was at play. And and I mean, he basically put a 5 into context of what he saw of me at that
connection.
You know, so
your real life experience.
Yeah, then you can say, okay, there's no so-called bluffing lah, because somebody can see it and explain it in the context of the tool. But otherwise, it's like, oh, I think it's a good thing. Like, no, maybe it's not that kind of thing. Like I was saying, like, yeah, I'm a learning person. Why is learner not my top 5?
Just curious, do you have deliberative?
Me? No, not my top 5. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think
so then you ask yourself, like, I thought I can solve problem, right? But why is my deliberative not there? Or no, is that deliberative? Yeah, right?
That was
so you can ask yourself this sort of question, right? Like, oh, I think I'm a learning person or I'm a HR person. I should have some of this, but it's not there. Yeah.
I had that question too, Eileen. I thought like, how come I got no restorative, right? Problem solving, like all input, just absorb a lot of things, but no output one. Input a lot lah. That was my first initial reaction. A lot of input, but no output lah.
So I mean, we all have different traits, right, that helps us perform better in certain roles. And we talk about liking profiling tools. I must admit, the first time I did Enneagram, I didn't really like it. I got a bit depressed reading it because everything is based on what is wrong. And you know, I like Clifton Strengths, which is based on what's right? So I was like, oh, these are the things. It's based on the 7 scenes.
Yep.
Right? The sin of pride, sin of gluttony, sin of whatever. And I go like, oh, I'm the helper. So I love helping people, right? That's why I do coaching and everything. And my sin is pride. It's like, huh? What? And
that I can attest to, sorry.
Thanks. So I mean, among other things, right? When I started to read it, I actually got quite I distanced myself a little bit from it because it didn't resonate with me. And then things happened, right? I got into trying to a place where I needed to understand myself a little bit more in relationship with some other people. And then I went like, hey, I can see this. I read the report again. I'm like, that sounds like me. And that's when the level of developments came out and go like, oh shit, that sounds like me in a not very good level of development. And I needed to improve. So I didn't like it when I first got it, but it became useful. So it's also important for us to come back to that.
I just want to say that I'm not a huge fan of positivistic tests. So StrengthsFinder has a little bit, depending on how you use it, it can be a little bit positivistic. When I mean positivistic, it means talk only good stuff only, which a bit I cannot tahan. So that's one of the major things that like I like StrengthsFinder because of the way it can structure your thoughts. However, if you're always only looking at the thing, because I have empathy in my top 5, therefore I understand you. It's like, no, sorry, no.
That's why it goes back to the fact that, your strength can actually be your weakness. That's what I told Alex in my email also. At the end of the day, it's how you use it. How forcefully do you push across to get your point? Just because you think that you have this particular item, then you say you must be right. That kind of thing.
So specifically for StrengthsFinder or Clifton Strengths, it is actually your talent finder. This top 5 are your talent teams, not your strengths, right? But talent finder doesn't quite sound as marketable as StrengthsFinder, right? So they kind of rebranded it, call it StrengthsFinder. But once you get into the whole depth of it, right, it's more about recognizing your talents as natural recurring patterns of thinking, feeling, or behaving, and then how you apply it will either make it a strength or a weakness.
Could I just say, right? I find talents, according to StrengthsFinder, and your Enneagram negative tendencies to be the same. I see them as the same thing. Your strengths are your weakness. Your strengths are also your way of looking at the world, your way of identifying things, but they're also your weakness. So that's why for me, right, I've never been for positivistic in that sense, because everything negative has positive. Everything positive has negative. They don't exist in a vacuum. It's just what kind of language we choose to use with it.
So that's the interesting bit, right? So I also learned that only after like responsibility, right? The overuse of it, that became my negative part, right? Or underuse of it is also my negative part. But just where's the balance? So I think context does play a bit in understanding, like when are you overusing it, or underusing it, or just nice. So I did, yes, you're right to say that when I first did StrengthsFinder, I didn't have that insight, but it only came about as I start to have more reflective inquiry around like, hey, why is it happening this way? Hey, actually I realized the thing that keep me is taking on a lot. Say yes, right? There a lot of responsibility, right? Then very hard to deliver. Then I know I've overused it. But that only took place through reflective inquiry, which is it's really like, which is what coaching does, right? You bring people into a deeper situation. And also what Alex talked about, right? After some time where you go into some kind of context and you reflect on it, and somehow the context shift you that you need to have a reflective inquiry into your own profile, then that's where I find that you usually get insights. So I do think it also bring out the weakness if really you study a bit more lah, in that sense lah. Yeah.
Indeed. Okay, guys, so it's 9:30. 1.5 hours just flew by. So let's bring it in for a landing, and then usually I'll just hand it over to Ethan to summarize everything because he does such a fantastic job doing it. Maybe what we can do is we go around and have everyone to share a little bit of what your biggest takeaway is from today's session. So let's start with Lillian.
I think for me, I think it's like how something like what Ethan said, that your strengths can also be your weakness. Yeah. Like how I think like because of that, right? Like I will always ask myself like, where's the balance? Or then I'll be like, if my strength is the weakness, then how can it be a strength lah? So I think, but yeah, like or rather, how do you find a balance? But I think it's like over time, it's true that people telling you, it's also true like working and depending on context, like what some of y'all have said. So yeah.
Thanks, Lillian. Nominate like the next person.
Maybe Faith.
So I think for me personally, it's just a reminder that, when we take personality tests, it depends on what it's trying to test at the end of the day and what you do with the information, and understand that it doesn't apply in every single situation. So when you actually like fall out of the box, don't blame yourself for it in a sense. Yeah, and to really be also mindful not to stereotype people. Yeah, because I also have some friends that they take certain results that like, they will always like say, oh, you're extrovert, that's why you do this, blah, blah, blah. That's very often happen in my group of circle of friends when we do personality tests together. So that's the thing we need to be mindful, not to just tell them, hey, because you're this, so you should what. Yeah, so it's like really to use it with a pinch of salt. At the end of the day, it's still you have to judge someone's personality based on your interaction. And yeah, and of course, if companies really use that as a way to gauge if you are able to fit into their company culture, then I rather you not even consider that company, because they are definitely not seeing you for who you are. They are using something else to define you, and that is incorrect, in my opinion. Yeah, something like that.
Okay, thanks, Faith. Pick the next person.
Okay. Eileen?
I think, first of all, my takeaway is there's so many other tools I've not heard of. And there are some tools that you refresh my scary memories about. Why I use or don't use them. Like Hogan was one. Okay, but okay. So that's one. I think the other thing I liked, Ethan, you said something around 80% trauma plus 20% was something else. What was that?
It's like context.
Okay. So I like that. Because I never thought about profiling tools as going back to trauma. Although I actually did one test. So as you're talking about trauma, I kind of Googled it, right? There's this test I took called identity development. So it's around the basics of trauma, and then they have what they call sessions, or whatever the name is, right? To kind of bring you back to the thing. It's quite scary until I dare not go for any more sessions. It's scaringly accurate, okay? But yeah. So that was another thing that kind of refreshed my memory around the thing. The last thing I like about and my takeaway from the session tonight is tendency versus identity. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. So those are my takeaways.
Thanks, Eileen.
Eddie, you've been quiet.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, just now I did Jaffer's link on the trauma thing also. So
saboteur, is it?
Yeah.
That was the first thing
So I think they're going to send me more information on my result over the next few days as well. So yeah, I'm learning quite a lot from this session also on the various tools available. And I find that I shouldn't be too hung up on strengths, as what you said. It should be more a guiding principle rather than a rule of thumb. So I find that maybe that's how I also have this mentality that, I always care about how people perceive me, how people look at me. So I think that, I try to portray, that personal brand image, that kind of thing, where you try to be someone who you really don't feel comfortable with. So I think, this session has given me more insight into really what I should be doing right now, as well as to affirm myself that I should actually appreciate who I am.
And that's really important.
It's awesome.
Thanks,
Eddie. And Eddie, for those of you who don't know, Eddie was one of my old-time regulars who disappeared for a while and has reappeared. So you continue to join us. And you may not be aware, but the previous few sessions, we actually talked about authenticity, vulnerability, and imposter syndrome, which is exactly what you just mentioned just now. So if you're keen, you can actually go back and review our previous discussions on our Facebook or YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah. Pick the next person.
Yeah, maybe it's Jin. Yeah, sorry.
My biggest takeaway is to actually help me to crystallize what are the benefits of taking profiling tools. So that if I want someone to do it, then I know like what reasons I can give to throw at the person to persuade the person to do it. That was my biggest takeaway.
Nice.
Yeah.
So we just help weaponize him.
It's good. Get them to join the meetup group. Thanks.
Yeah.
Next person, Zijin.
Who else haven't?
I think it's just Melissa left, right?
Melissa.
Melissa then.
Is Melissa still around? Because just now the last round she was.
Yeah, she's back.
Hi Melissa, are you? I can hear you now.
I am. Oh, hang on.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh,
Yeah, on.
okay. What I learned is that we should let the tools, the profiling tools, um to allow us to be empathetic towards others, as opposed to judging others like based on the results of the profiling tool. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, as opposed to judging the person lah. So like he that is without sin among you, let him cast the first stone. That's what I gathered. Yeah.
Nice.
I think one of the fellow meetup members, she shared about how in the job interview the profiling tool was used to pigeonhole the prospective candidate, right? Yeah, so I think to a certain extent also like I'm not sure about career wise, but I think like amongst friends, like yeah, we would use it to be like as a form of empathy, right? Like the person reacts like that because of a certain experience that she had faced, as opposed to like yeah, judging on like, oh, she's like that on because X, Y, Z. Yeah, so that's what I gathered from today's session.
Thanks, Melissa. Okay, so I'll share my takeaway, then Jeff first, then Ethan, you can bring it to a close. So for me, I like the conversation. Well, basically I'm curious about that profiling tool that Ethan just mentioned about all the 500 question one. So I was thinking of going to take it, but yeah, let me see the results first, then I'll think about whether I share it with you.
I already probably know your answers already lah.
You're
most likely
Take
cluster
it
C
in
anyway.
the morning when your mind are not blown. Yeah, otherwise.
What's the name of the 500?
What
MMPI.
MMPI.
So wait, I will give you guys a link.
Then you can talk. My input will help you search.
Go.
So
how come the MMPI one that I took on TrueT is so short? It wasn't 500 questions. It was like maybe 30. Is it the abbreviated version?
Yeah, I think it's the abbreviated version that people have been giving lah.
Oh, so you have to pay to.
No. There are definitely free versions available.
Yeah, there's a 500 question version that's free according to Ethan.
Oh, can you send the link?
Yes,
I'll find it.
Okay. Then what about the scenes one that you mentioned just now? The scene, like that you said there was a test.
Anagram.
Oh, anagram. It exposes
yeah.
your scenes, like
trauma.
Oh, trauma.
By using classification according to the 17th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Actually,
like gluttony and all. 17th,
yeah.
Gluttony, all.
Yep.
Yeah. So like if you're type 7 is gluttony, right?
Yep.
The
type 7.
fear of missing out. Yeah, so every one of it has a certain fear. I'm like, wow, so depressing. But there's nuggets of truth lah.
It depends on how you want to take it. Like if you cannot take negativity, then then what's the point of living?
That's a belief. That's a belief. But okay. Jeff.
Key takeaway. So I really like the conversation as well. I think I identified a lot more distinctions lah. In particular, like trauma is a new picture that brings in to the psychometric profiling tool. I know it contributes to it, but keen to explore. There are a couple of things that also I like from the conversation is like the organizational context, which I think Karen and Eileen brought in, right? So one also is like I think also Alex mentioned something about leadership development, not evaluation. I think that sticks with me. Know that what that tool is used for in particular. And then I think you just got reminded around like, oh, there are metaphors and sometimes whether it's useful lah, as long as it helps you with the useful for your own personal growth as well as in terms of building your relationship with others. You are more or less on the guiding track. If not, then you need to think about like, is that serving you or not? Yeah, that's it. Ethan, to you.
All right. So let me summarize the whole experience. We started the whole discussion with what kind of test we like. And we started going like, oh, this is more positive, this is more like this. We all had these little reasons as to why we preferred a certain test. But as we started talking about it, we started going into why you took tests in the first place. And it's like, oh, it gives insights, it allows me to read people better. But then comes the best part, which is where it becomes the weapon. So that's when Eileen started the whole conversation. Thankfully, she led the way in going into the problem I have with personality tests is, and it starts going into that, which is great because that's exactly where we need to be. The weakness of personality and psychometric tests is exactly its strength. It's a reflection of who you think you are. It's a reflection of how your tendencies are, not who you are. Right? So that's where the whole discussion really went around. Because if we stereotype people according to it at work, we're missing the point. If we stereotype what is good and we brag about what is good, we're missing the point too. There are a lot of elements about psychometric tests that gives us insight into who we are, what we could be. If we use it with kindness, with goodness, and with a lot of awareness. And I go back to the word called trauma because for me, everything comes from trauma, which is a negative word. But to me, trauma is inevitable. It's just what it is. You can utilize it to your strengths, or you can let it go and then use it with balance and use it as a strength. Or you can just simply say, this is my trauma, take it or leave it, which is what some people do with personality tests, right? So this is exactly what we also talk about along the way, is like to use it with humility, with interest in developing yourself, rather than simply trying to say that this is me. And that's also where we also went back into going back to humility, finding a coach, having the right people to support you, asking your friends whether these results are real. And then one of my favorite points about this is don't just do one, do all if you can. It gives you a lot more perspective about you as a person. And that's where it becomes very useful. And with that, we can close the session.
Well done. Thank you, Ethan. Thanks, everyone. So the next session, we're probably going to start our profiling tool shootout. So we haven't quite decided what profiling tool versus what profiling tool to compare. We might do a few. So we will go back, talk about it. Strengths will definitely be one, right? Even genetics will probably be one. I'm guessing Enneagram, MBTI, DISC, all
Definitely will come here.
Will probably all come out as well. So we're going to compare profiling tools and just have a great discussion around that. Also, again, for those of you who may not have heard, in June, we are planning a strengths coaching fiesta. So kind of spoke with Gala. They did coaching boot camps before and thought I'll pick it up and try to organize something for people. So watch out for more information. Once it's ready, it will be released and you can all sign up for it.
Cool.
What happens during the boot camp?
Oh, so okay, so this is the plan, right? We're going to gather coaches together. We're going to pair them up, and then we're going to get people in groups, and we'll do group coaching with the coaches. So what will happen is each group will have 2 coaches. I'm planning for each group to have about anything between 4 to 6 participants, and then depending on what the context is, what the familiarity with the tool is, we just allow the coaches to take the group through an understanding of their profiles or how to apply them. So that is the broad idea and vision of how that will turn out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, cool. I'm going to stop the live stream and I'll see you all. Those of you who would like to stay back for a little while, you can do so. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks for